Hi, and welcome to Conversations with Pascale and Marléne. It's great to be back, and today we're going to be talking about compassion. First of all, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Marléne Rose Shaw. I'm a therapist, a coach, and self-help author, and I specialise in empowering people to stop people pleasing and set boundaries and communicate with courage so that they can live life on their own terms, feel really confident and have great relationships. Over to you, Pascale.
Sounds amazing. So good. Okay, I'm Pascale Lane. I am a therapeutic confidence and success coach, and I help women who run their own business to be more confident, successful, wealthy, and abundant in all areas of their life.
It's all good. It's all good.
All good. It always puts such a big smile on my face.
Just helping people. I just love all that, because when we help people feel confident in themselves, they get to have great relationships, they get to have great success, they get to do what they came here for, what we come here for, to be happy and
what we all came here for, but so many aren't achieving.
yeah. It's great stuff. So talking about compassion today, so we're going to be looking at, first of all, what is compassion? And then how can we actually be more compassionate to ourselves? Because I think when people hear that word compassion, they automatically think about being compassionate to others. But how can we be more compassionate to ourselves is a point as well. And then in terms of other people, how can we be compassionate towards somebody when we feel that they're not treating us very well? How can we still be compassionate? So let's start with, what is compassion?
My God, how long have we got?
How long have we got? What is compassion for you?
Oh gosh, compassion. Well, I mean, I think first of all, I think you're absolutely spot on in saying, sometimes that we think compassion is kind of what we do to others, is what we give to others. But actually, compassion, like everything, I know you know this, everything has to start with self. So compassion is just about being kind, being understanding, being empathetic, not sympathetic, but empathetic. And really, I think, when I think of compassion, I mean, obviously I think of compassion to others, but I also think very much about how we are, and I say we because I think we all do this to a degree. We are so good, most of us most of the time are so good at being compassionate to others, but are very rarely compassionate to ourselves. And so that being kind, being empathetic, being nurturing, being supportive, this is how I consider compassion. It's easier to dish it out than it is to actually take it on board and embody it ourselves. And I think really, to a degree, you can't even truly, I don't know, tell me what you think. I don't think that we can truly be fully compassionate to others unless we are able to be compassionate to ourselves.
Truly compassionate. Yes.
Truly compassionate.
We can be kind and considerate to other people. We can be loving and caring and thoughtful, but it's compassion that, it's a special thing, I think, compassion. When I used to think of compassion, I used to think of a sort of compassion to humankind. It's like this big global sort of like a sort of an ideology of, walking along the street and there's a man fallen down, broken his leg. Be compassionate and call an ambulance. That used to be my sort of mindset around it. And of course, as years went on and I've trained and I've worked and done all the things I've done, I'm much more aware now of compassion as being a very specific thing. And as you say, it is about empathy And I think it's also, for me, it's about understanding of human frailty, that we all have our, you know, so many facets to ourselves. We have our strong parts, we have our, you know, not so strong parts, we have our habits that might not be great, we have our, you know, we make mistakes, we, you know, we have human error. And there's something for me compassionate about that, that accepting that in ourselves and others. So it's a sort of empathy, as in, yes, we're all human. And then it takes it further, as in, yes, we're all human and we mess up sometimes. I won't use the F word, but we mess up, you know, and that's just part of being human. So for me, compassion covers that as well, just acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance. And would you necessarily include forgiveness in that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard to forgive sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. But I think if we have compassion and sort of an acknowledgement that this other person is just a human being, you know, we can't put them on a pedestal and expect them to be 100% amazing all the time, even though we thought they were when we first met them, perhaps. Then it makes it easier to forgive, because we recognize that they're just another version of us with a different base.
Yeah, absolutely. And that everyone is struggling.
Mm-hmm.
That we are all struggling in our own way, in maybe not in all areas, but, you know, in some areas I think most of us struggle. Like nobody's got it nailed, right? I mean, maybe like a couple of like Buddhist monks that might might tell a different story, but I mean the truly enlightened ones in the world. But I think overwhelmingly, even they would admit their struggles. So okay, so let's go back to self-compassion. Before we just kind of like veer into relationship compassion, and like not like necessarily like spousal relationship, but just like all of the relationships. Self-compassion, I mean, why do we find it so difficult? Why do we find self-compassion so hard to achieve?
Well, personally, I don't anymore. I'm good at it these days. Never used to be.
You're enlightened.
I'm enlightened. I think it's because I do a lot of work with inner child, and it's the compassion for the inner child. I think formerly I didn't, you know, I found it harder, and I think a lot of people do find it harder, and I think that's because of messages we're given, you know, in our childhood. Don't feel sorry for yourself, you know, you're not allowed to feel your feelings, that people have lots of messages. Don't be you know, don't be so dramatic, don't, you know, you must be strong, there's something wrong with you if you don't pass this exam, or you know, you stumble through this situation, you've got to achieve and be successful all the time. And I think there's that programming. I think maybe there's also a bit of defensiveness goes on in there. If I allow myself to be vulnerable, I might crumble. So I've got to be strong all the time. If I give myself compassion, it's like, it's a mistaken idea that people have. It's like they do it with acceptance as well. If I, you know, I'm letting myself off the hook, and then I'm going to sort of drift through life, and I'm not going to achieve all the things I need to achieve because I'm, you know, allowing myself not to be the best at everything all the time. So what do you think, Pascale?
Well, I think first of all, congratulations, and it's not something that you struggle with. It's something that I massively struggle with, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm much better at catching it and recognizing it. So I mean, it doesn't linger like it used to. But for me, I find that I I hold myself to a very high standard, and an unnecessarily high standard. And you know, like you say, it comes back down to the inner child stuff. It comes back down to the vulnerable teenager stuff. It comes back down to behaviors or characteristics that I would like to think that I don't have anymore, but that sneak in and sometimes catch me unaware. And then that's usually when I give myself so my self-compassion struggles more around, and actually I think this is front of mind for me at the moment, because I'm doing a lot on I'm reading an amazing book, or listening to an amazing book at the moment on shadow work. So really accepting, for anybody who doesn't know shadow work, really, rather than pushing away, and it is self-compassion, right? Rather than pushing away our darker characteristics and personality traits, actually just kind of accepting and being accepting of, and being at peace with the fact that we all have these personality traits to varying degrees. And the difficulty is that we get them shamed out of us from such a young age. So there's a lot of shame attached to certain behaviors. And that's what comes up for me. And it's not like, I don't mean it from a point of view that like, I had parents who made me feel, you know, I don't mean it like that. I just mean like societally, if that's even a word, culturally, we are nurtured to push out certain characteristics and certain behaviors which are actually inherent to us all. And so when those behaviors rear up in me, which they do, and I'm you know, I would be an absolute liar if I said they didn't. Do I meet those behaviors with shame? Or do I meet those behaviors with self-compassion? And I again, I would be a liar if I said I always met them with self-compassion, because there's still a lot of shame attached to how I feel about certain parts of myself, which which like on one hand, to sound contradicting, on one hand I'm kind of at peace with, but on the other hand, like, there's still work to be done. And you know, I think we said this in our last session last week, you know, I say this all the time, you know, personal development is not one and done, right? We are all continuing to learn and grow, so it's not like I'm a therapist and so therefore I've got it all nailed. Like, I mean, absolutely hats off to people, to you, if you feel like you have. But for me, I think that will continue to be an ongoing journey for me, because I get triggered, I get angry, I get frustrated, I say things that are inappropriate. You know, I'm me.
It
You
never
know,
stops. It never stops, does it? I mean, you know, we go on and on and on throughout our whole lives. I think, I mean, you know, I get triggered. I do the sort of self-talk thing, but I catch it very early these days. I think that's what I meant. I catch it very early. It doesn't linger. And I think because I tend to talk to my child self, I feel, for me, that's my version of self-compassion. So for me, I will soothe her, and I will tell her that whatever mistake she's made, it's all okay, that she's human. And at times I will tell her, well, it's no wonder you did that or behaved that way, or makes sense. And for me, that is a version of compassion.
Yeah.
Because it's just seeing that humanity. And so when I catch myself with those shaming thoughts, it doesn't happen very often these days. But that's because I've put a lot of work into talking to Mimi. It's my inner child. That was my nickname when I was younger. Talking to Mimi, and just as you say, by the way, will you put that in the comments, the book that you're listening to about the shadow work? That would, because that I'd like to see that, and I'm sure our listeners would like, what our viewers would like to see that. But it's as you say, it's that thing about accepting that all of it is all okay. And even if we catch ourselves shaming ourselves, that's just part of life as well. It's just not sitting with it for too long and letting it take over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the key. I think that's the key to everything, really. Like we said last week, didn't we? Like, you can go there, but like, don't unpack. You're not staying there. You know,
maybe that's why I see self-compassion as easier now, because I see it more as a kind of a general acceptance that everything is what it is, and it's human. It's about being human, as compared to maybe I used to see self-compassion as in, oh, I forgive you. You did something wrong, but I forgive you anyway. There's a difference for me.
Yeah. Okay. So you did something wrong and I forgive you anyway. Let's guide that then. Let's segue that into, how do we offer self-compassion when we feel we're being treated unfairly?
Offer compassion to ourselves, to others.
To others.
Right, yeah. You mean if somebody's being mean to you, how can you be compassionate towards them?
Or if somebody is somebody, I mean, that's a great point. Is it always about being mean?
No, if we are perceiving them as being mean, if we feel attacked in some way, because it's our own experience, isn't it? So we might experience somebody as being mean, they might experience themselves as just trying to defend something, or they might not even realize, they might think they're just explaining something. But if we're feeling, for whatever reason, some negativity, or we're experiencing somebody's behavior as negative, how can we turn around then offer them compassion? It's quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's always, well, maybe not always, but it's often a lot harder to be empathetic to somebody else when you feel wronged.
Yes. Wronged is actually a good word. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an essential life skill. An essential life skill to actually say, okay, fine, this is what is going on for me. What is going on for them that has led us both into this situation? How have, without trying to apportion too much blame, how have we both got to here? And I think when we are able to do that, compassion of others becomes easier. I don't think it's always easy at all, but I think it becomes easier when we're able to understand the other person's journey.
Oh, completely. And it's something that comes up a lot, because, I work quite a lot with couples, and it's something that comes up a lot, is this, well, how can I be compassionate to you because you've been mean to me, sort of attitude. And each is saying to the other, well, I'll be nice to you when you start being nice to me. No, I'll be nice to you when you start being nice to me. And couples can get quite into that cycle between them, and they both put up their guard, and they're both scared to let their guard down and be vulnerable. And so they get caught up. And actually, two things that work very well with that is, and we can take on board, whether it's in a couple experience or any relationship, is, this is my experience and this is your experience. We're both entitled to have our experience. It's not about, you've done this to me and you're mean, as we said earlier, or it's about, I'm experiencing this situation through this lens, and I acknowledge that you're experiencing this situation through your lens. Neither is right nor wrong. Neither is, yes, but you've got to see it my way. Both people are entitled to have their own experience. And when we can get to that acknowledgement, this is my experience, and I'm entitled to my experience. And if I feel you're being mean or whatever, I'm entitled to that. But this is just my experience, and this is your experience, and you're entitled to your experience as well. And when we can get to that point, then we can start to speak from the heart. And as soon as we start speaking from the heart, then we can be compassionate, because we can say, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling rejected, I feel humiliated, I feel overwhelmed, whatever it is. And the moment we do that, the other person, because we're so scared to do it, aren't we? In case we get attacked, because we made ourselves vulnerable. But actually, most of the time, the other person almost says, well, thank God you told me that, because I'm feeling the same. And that's when you start to connect. And that's the compassion, isn't it? When you're able to have another person is able, and you're able to express your vulnerability, then you open the door for compassion between you. But it has to start with, this is my experience and it's valid, and this is your experience and that's valid too, I find.
And what happens if the other person isn't on board with, because we're talking about accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you've got one person that isn't taking any accountability for the situation?
Mm-hmm. So in what respect? Not acknowledging that their experience and your experience are two different experiences?
Not acknowledging any responsibility for the other person's pain or
Mm-hmm.
hurt, or taking any responsibility for any wrongdoing.
Yeah,
Like we've come up against that in couple work, don't we?
yeah. And I guess it's about coming back to your relationship with somebody, whether it's a couple or a friendship or whatever. It's about saying, do we care enough about this connection and relationship we have with each other to do this work, to take this accountability? Because if you want to work on a relationship, then you're taking accountability for doing the work. If you really don't, then there isn't any way forward at that point in time, but there might be a bit further down the line. Sometimes people need time to go through process and think about things, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that the overwhelming majority of people are able to. I suppose it's about. I'm thinking of the barometer. I'm thinking about the red mist. You know, we don't clear anything when we're up when we're up in the mist. We need to wait for it to come down. I've used two different analogies there, so my apologies. Let's stick with the barometer. Like when we're up into the red of the barometer, we don't sort anything out. We're too angry, like we're flooded, we're too emotional. And then you have to wait for it to come down. Only then, once it starts to come down and down and down, do we start to then see reason, and take on board what the other person is saying. But I mean, I've worked with couples in the past where one person is just kind of well, they're not permanently dancing, but it feels like they're permanently dancing on the edge of the red. And so like you manage to bring them down, and then like it just takes one tiny thing and whoosh, they're straight back up again, and you're like, oh, it's so difficult. But you know, I mean, that I wouldn't necessarily say that is a fair representation of everyone. But I think I think it's a thing. And I think in those moments, it's then, does the other person, here's a question for you. This is a bit of a loaded question. Does the other person then have responsibility to be compassionate towards the person that is not there yet? Or does that allude to colluding in the chaos?
Yeah, there's a kind of people pleasing aspect, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think it's about whenever you've got this divide, whether it's with a couple or it's family member or whoever it is, it has to start with, do we want to work on this relationship? Because the relationship is, you've got the divide is the two people, the relationship is on being on the same page. If we both want this relationship to get better, then that's common ground. That's something we agree on. And so it's about what can we each put into this relationship. And if that means kind of being a bit compassionate, even in the face of, somebody obviously being defensive, giving them a little bit of leeway for a little while. But it comes back down to boundaries as well. It's like, how much or what period of time do I want to put into this relationship before I make a decision that the other person isn't on the same page with me about this relationship. It's not about me and them and not liking each other and all of this. It's about this relationship. So I think it is very much about making that decision, isn't it? It's like, have I done everything I possibly can for this relationship within the context of also respecting myself? And if we can answer that question, have I looked at a win-win situation all round? Have I made sure that I am respected and I'm respecting myself? And okay, I may have given them a little bit of leeway just to give them time to let their shield down, their guard down, but I have a boundary around how much of that I'm willing to give. And quite often there's a lot about resentment as well. It can be quite compassionate. It can be difficult to be compassionate with somebody who's, when you and they, or one of you, has a lot of resentment. So there's something about clearing that stuff that's built up over time. Because resentment, I always think of it, it's like kind of silt in a river. It builds up and builds up and builds up, and the flow of love can't happen so easily.
Yeah.
And kindness and acceptance and all that, because there's all this silt. So it's about clearing that.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, well, a perfect time, I think, Marléne, for you to do a plug again on your work and how people can get in contact with you if they are interested in clearing the silt.
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with people, with couples and individual people with relationship problems, and helping people feel more confident in themselves and more empowered. So just you'll see my website in the comments below the video, so you can just go there and you'll see the form, you can fill it out, or my number's there if you want to WhatsApp me, or you can message me here on Facebook.
Fab. All right.
And same
for me as well. If anybody wants to get in touch, learn a bit of self-compassion, understand where it comes from, how we can heal. I mean, I'm all about healing in order to grow into the confident, abundant, successful self, like permanently, not just as a short-term fix. Then get in contact, and my contact details will also be down below. Fantastic. Marléne, always a pleasure.
Okay, see you next time. Bye.
See you next time.